Yeah. So you are the conversationalist. I am very happy to have run into you and to be able to open up our conversation here with this question. And how did you do the last 3.5 years living through a pandemic? How did you get through it, and how did it change you?
I got through it by writing a book.
Okay.
So prior to the pandemic, I had done some work with a firm that really got great results doing the work that I do, the neuroscience of conversation. And as luck would have it, I met with the guy, Henry DeVries, who published my book, and he said, well, what are you going to do about this? Well, it was time to do it. And so I already had, the book is based on the actual program that I delivered. And so I spent the time writing a book. Yeah. And so in lockdown and doing whatever, but it kept me busy, it kept me occupied. And I discovered through that process that not only myself, but the people that I work with, the people that I talk with, and even my family members, Joe, really were suffering from a lot of angst, uncertainty, like what's going to happen, like waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Yeah.
And and when we understand that that's what's going on in people's feelings, we can work with them in terms of opening up the conversation so we can really understand them. More than ever, with all the uncertainty in the world, people want a personal connection.
Yeah.
They want to know that you're listening. They want to know that you care. They want to know that you're in tune to them. And so
Yeah.
that's what I've learned.
Yeah. It's very true. As connected as we are, we needed that personal connection. That was very key. So if I put you in front of a bunch of third grade students and one of the kids, it's career day, looks up and says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How would you answer that child?
I would answer that child in a third grade way. And I would simply say, I teach people how to talk to each other and be nice.
Yeah, we need that. Why don't they teach these essentials in school? Like financial independence, being good in a relationship, conversing effectively with others. All of these very essential skills are never like a part of the curricula.
No, they're not. And they're absolutely critical, particularly with our young people in terms of being able to communicate.
Yeah.
They're on the pads, they are on, create a write. We don't teach writing, actually, Joe. Writing or reading we do teach in math, but those are measurable kinds of things. And so the test scores always reflect those, but we never think about how do we integrate with the concepts that we're teaching in the classroom, how to get along with one another. What are the principles of good living and how do we solve problems together?
So what did you want to be in the third grade? What was your dream to grow up and become?
Well, there was two. One, I remember distinctly being in third grade, standing in my grandma's bedroom. She had this big, huge mirror, and I had the hairbrush in front of me like a microphone. And I was dancing and singing and dancing and singing. I wanted to be a performer.
Yeah.
The other part of me said, we always got the daily newspaper. Now, this really dates me. This is not my first rodeo. And so I would rush home to get the newspaper after school and read Ann Landers, because I thought,
Yeah.
you know what, she gives good advice. She
Hmm.
listens and gives good advice. Not that and I thought, well, that's what I want to be.
Yeah.
That's what I want to be. I want to help people talk to one another. As a kid growing up, your parents say, do this, do that. Children are meant to be seen and not heard, in some variation of that. And there was always this piece about, yeah, but my voice matters too.
Yeah. It's interesting. I feel dated too, because I remember her very well in the
Do you?
newspaper. Oh yeah. And then Paul Harvey, no one remembers Paul Harvey, you know, and he was the one that always dispensed that advice on the radio,
Yes.
nationwide for decades. So it's interesting. So how did you arrive at this point? Take me back to where you were born and raised, and how conversations and how this love of language and helping people connect through language, how did that happen?
Well, my origin story is I grew up in a small farming community in southern Minnesota. And so the lessons that I learned were primarily from my mother. And she simply said, a woman's place is in the world, and you need an education to do that.
Yeah.
And so there was never any doubt or any question about learning was important. And as a second child of four, I was always at the dinner table and sort of listening and trying to understand what the other siblings were always chiming in with. And so I really developed a position of being able to listen and then to challenge, because that's how you got heard. You had a controversial point of view. You didn't agree all the time. And so when I went off to college, I thought I'd be in the theater arts.
Yeah.
And I tried that for a semester, and I thought, this is not for me. And putting on some gunny sack and outfit and being, no, that's not for me.
Yeah.
And so in those days, there were really a couple options, a teacher or a nurse.
Yeah.
So I went and got my bachelor's degree in nursing, and I kept thinking all the time that there's a place to really reach people through the conversations that we lead. And that's a lot of what it was. And so I did that for a while, and I thought, well, I'm not sure that this nursing thing is the right thing. So I went on and got my master's of science, and then I taught at the university for a while, and then I moved into administration. In administration, it was great to be able to develop programs for people to help people. But I also noticed that all the decisions about the funding were made behind the doors with the men with the beautiful watches and the beautiful suits. And I said to myself, if I'm going to make a change, I have to be at that table. So I went off and got an MBA and joined the table. And that's where it all began, to be able to make an impact in the people's lives by letting my voice be heard and being the voice of the patient. So that what I learned there was, so as I was a healthcare executive for 30 years, right? And so what I learned is that some conversations went really well. And I thought I was pretty good at conversations. I told people, I listened to people, I solved their problems, I gave good advice, but there was something missing. Joe, there was something missing, because you know what? Quite honestly, some people you would get along really well with, and they're easy to talk to, and some aren't.
Mm.
And so being a researcher and being inquisitive and being that Ann Landers detective, I simply said, why? What is going on here? It's more than active listening. This is more than what Google tells you. There's a whole, and what I discovered was profound. And there's a whole science about what goes on in our brains before words are even spoken that influence the conversations that we lead, which makes people either open up and trust, or they close down in protection.
Yeah. It's fascinating because it's true. I was a communications major in college, and I remember, I wanted to get into broadcasting and journalism, but you did have to peel back the psychological layers of how we do interact. And I think communication is like anything else. If you practice it, you're conscientious and you want to do good at it, you're going to. But if it's something that's just a byproduct of, just being alive, and you have to do it and you have to get things done, it's like anything. It all depends on how much you pay attention and how important it is, I mean, because it takes work if you want to do it well.
It takes a lot of work. And I think many times my point of view is many times communication gets a back seat because everything else is more important. The technical, the numbers, the stats, the facts, the figure are more important. But at the base of it, everything we do, Joe, in life and in business begins with a conversation.
Yeah.
So let's teach people how you can really open up the conversation and work with people.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So let me ask you this. Who's been a hero for you in your life?
I think my mom, way back in world, she left a small town in Minnesota and went to McAllister College, which is a private college, and worked her way through and became, at that point in time, it was called a bookkeeper. And her philosophy was that education is empowerment. When you have your education and you know what you're going to do, and you have the ability to do that, you write your own ticket. She did in a funny way. She taught for a year, and then she married my dad, and she was really the brains behind the operation on the farm, and really helped him navigate and course correct, but never was really recognized for that. And so her philosophy was, and to this day, we would get $25 for a Christmas present or a birthday present, and some of that always went to the educational fund, and then we could spend the rest of it. But it was always that education was not an option, because education equals empowerment.
Yeah. So as a conversationalist, who would be a dream person for you to talk to, interview, or interact with?
Oh gosh, anyone.
Anyone.
The first one that comes to my mind is anyone, because I'm incessantly curious about what makes people tick. And
Yeah.
being able to open up a conversation where I learn so much and that I grow. I say, if you've had a conversation with someone and you didn't learn something new about them, you haven't had a conversation, you've had a dialogue.
Yeah. The one thing that we learn too in our society through mass media are interviews are big, whether it's late night from Johnny Carson to, Bob Costas used to have conversations. There's all kinds of people that have had these Who was one of your favorite people that you would tune into? I mean, Larry King, there's all kinds of people, but who was one of your favorite people that would have conversations that you felt were engaging and you got something out of it?
Well, I don't do a lot of late night TV, but I did during the pandemic tune into Jimmy Kimmel.
Yeah,
And
he's wonderful.
I think he's fascinating because he certainly makes his point. He's not afraid to be controversial and back it up with facts. Of course, there's some humor and his point of view is embedded in that. But I find that uh, really attractive. And when he interviews his guests, he's really in tune to them.
Yeah.
And if it's a difficult question that he's asking it, he couches it in such a way that it doesn't make you, my perception is it doesn't make the person being interviewed feeling like climbing up and like he's attacking me, but he's opening it up. So I think he's a beautiful interviewer and I find him really quite funny.
Yeah, I do too. I love Jimmy. And I remember in my 20s watching Comedy Central when it just began, and he was on shows like there was a show called Ben Stein's Money, and it was a game show. And Ben Stein from Ferris Bueller's, he's a big money guy. So the whole idea of the show was that, I can't remember the exact concept, but Jimmy was like a sidekick and he would always throw these jokes out. I was like, man, this guy's funny. And then he went on to another show and it's like, man, this guy's good. And I just kept thinking he's destined for something else. But the thing I love the best about Jimmy is that he really gets emotional and he really gets weird when David Letterman gets around because that was his guy. And he always talks about how his mom got him the birthday cake when he was 10 or something like that. And it had Late Show with David Letterman. And I was a Letterman disciple. I mean, I grew up watching and loving Letterman, and I feel the same feelings he has. He was really kind of a disciple. I mean, the same way that Letterman reveres Carson. It's like you have these people that you look up to and admire, and it just keeps that torch passed on.
And they keep growing in their skills and their
Uh-huh.
abilities. They're all different and they all have a different point of view, but you clearly know their point of view. And I sense that when they interview, they really do care about the people they're interviewing.
Yeah, for sure. So let me ask you this. Every day you wake up, we all have motivations. We all have this fire in us. What is that for you? What gets you up? What gets you loving the conversations and the potential of every day?
Every day I wake up and I say, what can I do to contribute? What can
Yeah,
I do to help another person? What can I do to contribute? What can I do today that will um, help people in a simple way?
what's no, go ahead.
Yeah, whether it's my next door neighbor who's 93 years old and
Yeah,
I buy in her house and bring her the mail and take her garbage out, which is just a simple, like it's no big deal, right? But it brings her delight. And every time I ring the doorbell or I have a key to her house, and every time I come in, she just lights up and gives me a big hug. Those are the kinds of things that light me up. Being helpful, being kind,
yeah,
with no expectation of anything in return, just because it feels good. You know, our brain, the more that we give, the more that we give and the more that we help, and the more that our brain just lights up with that green and it just feels good.
yeah, for sure. What's been the best advice you've ever gotten?
The best advice I got from my dad was from my dad, and he says, why do you always have to pick a bone with me? And I said, well, because I do. I like to take a contrarian point of view, not to put people down, but to open up.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
people say the world is blue, and I will simply say, well, that's interesting. What do you think? What makes the world blue to you?
yeah,
Well, it's a beautiful sun. Some will say it's a beautiful sky. Another person will say, well, it's all the trouble that we have in the world. So I love to take kind of a contrarian point of view and just poke a little bit in a gentle way, not in a way to make myself not to make myself bigger than someone else, but to sort of like be with them in the moment and understand, poke and be curious and learn so much.
yeah. So let me ask you this. If you had a dream tonight, you ran into a 20-year-old version of yourself, and you could give that version of you a piece of advice based on the wisdom you've gained in your life up to this point, what advice would you give your younger self?
I would tell my younger self, just go for it. Go for it. I remember when I graduated from college, I had this dream that I would be speaking to people and on stage and traveling and teaching people. Didn't know what that was about, but that dream of was always there. And so I would tell my 20-year-old self, even though you don't know how it's going to do, take the next step, take the next step, take the
Yeah,
next step. see what opens up. We live in a world that we always want to know what the next step is and to have that locked in, but we don't know what we don't know. And so when you take that next step and you're open to influence, you're open to what other people have to say and guide you and take that guidance, then the next thing happens.
What are you the proudest of everything you've done in your life? What are you the proudest of?
Oh, I'm most proud that I have raised an awesome human being called my daughter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, excellent.
That was my
So,
whole goal. I told her when she had her children, I said, your whole goal in life, your whole reason for being motherhood to me means that you do everything within your power. Sometimes you're a disciplinarian, sometimes you say the hard things. You must say the hard things, set rules, set limits and boundaries, but your job is to raise a human being that you're proud of and that will go out into the world and do well for other people, not just for themselves, but for other people. So that's my proudest moment, my proudest moment, and it continues on and on. It just keeps getting better and better and better.
so everyone out there has a perception of you, family, friends, your readers, everybody that runs into you, but you ultimately run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I try to be a kind, thoughtful, and generous person. No matter who I meet, no matter where I go, there's always a smile. There's always a, and it comes from the inside out. It comes from a heart of caring about people, period.
Yeah,
So whether I'm in the grocery store and checking out and someone's loading my groceries and I look at their name tag and I say, well, Sally, how's your day been going? And all of a sudden you get this big smile.
yeah,
It's so much that we can do that we're not even aware of that touches a person's heart and makes their day better.
yeah,
Like if I saw you in the street and you were walking your dog, it was something to say, oh, hi, I'm Mary. Who are you? Oh,
yeah,
hi. Nice to meet you. Your dog is beautiful. Those are the little things that we do every day that light people up.
yeah,
And so that's what I would like to, that's what I think I am. I think I'm most of the time, now I'm not all the time.
yeah,
Most of the time I'm kind. And rather than being snarky or putting people down, I always ask myself, what's going on in their world?
yeah, yeah, for sure. So if anyone wants to get your book, learn more about you, reach out to you, anything about your world, where can they go?
They can go to LinkedIn.
Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
LinkedIn, and the book is there and it talks about what goes on
Yeah.
for us that we can open up our conversations or close them down.
What a beautiful mission you have, Mary. Thank you so much for having a conversation with me and for all that you're doing. It's great to meet you. I appreciate it.
So nice to meet you, and I appreciate you introducing me to your audience, and I hope that they get a glimmer of kindness and how they can.
I have no doubt. It's
Okay.
radiated this whole time. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye, Joe.
Take care.